trust. It's the foundation of education. We entrust our children to teachers, believing they'll guide, protect, and nurture young minds. But what happens when that sacred trust becomes a weapon? When the classroom becomes a hunting ground? When the person meant to guide you becomes your destroyer? In the spring of 2018, in a town where parents never thought to question the safety of their children, a forbidden attraction between a teacher and her student would cross boundaries no one should ever breach, ending not with grades or graduation, but with blood on the forest floor and a community forever changed. What happens when the person meant to guide you becomes your destroyer? Think about the teachers who shaped your life. The ones who saw potential in you, who pushed you to achieve more than you believed possible. Now imagine if their interest wasn't professional but predatory. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were hiding their true nature? That beneath their smile and encouraging words lay calculated manipulation? This is exactly what happened to Evan Grayson, a 17-year-old senior at Ravenwood Academy. Bright, athletic, and seemingly destined for success, Evan became the target of his literature teacher's obsession, an obsession that would ultimately claim his brother's life. Before we continue with this disturbing story, I need to address something important. The relationship between a teacher and student exists within a profound power imbalance. The authority, influence, and trust inherently given to educators creates a dynamic where students, even those on the cusp of adulthood, cannot truly consent. When teachers exploit this dynamic, they don't just break laws. They shatter the very foundation of educational ethics and leave lasting psychological damage. Today we're examining how Clara Whitmore, a beloved 32-year-old literature teacher, manipulated her position to isolate, control, and ultimately destroy the lives of those around her. We'll trace how seemingly innocent after-school meetings evolved into psychological manipulation, and how one brother's protective instincts led to a confrontation in the woods that would end with a knife, a cover-up, and a murder that shocked a community to its core. Each year, hundreds of teachers across America are investigated for inappropriate relationships with students. Yet most cases never reach the catastrophic endpoint we witnessed in Ravenwood. What pushed this particular forbidden relationship beyond manipulation into murder? What red flags were missed? And could it happen in your community? If you're finding value in understanding the psychology behind these crimes and learning to recognize warning signs before tragedy strikes, please consider subscribing to True Crime Dossier. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell now to join our community dedicated to examining real cases that offer vital lessons about human behavior, manipulation, and protection of the vulnerable. Ravenwood seemed immune to the troubles of the outside world. Nestled within the misty forests of the Pacific Northwest, this community prided itself on safety, close connections, and educational excellence. The town's centerpiece was Ravenwood Academy, a prestigious private high school where parents believed their children would receive not just academic instruction, but moral guidance. The academy stood tall against a backdrop of ancient pines, its red brick facade and manicured grounds projecting stability and tradition. Students walked its hallways with a sense of purpose and belonging. Teachers were not just instructors but mentors, selected through rigorous screening, their credentials and character equally scrutinized. Or so everyone believed. What the parents, administrators, and students of Ravenwood couldn't see was how easily this system of trust could be weaponized. How classroom doors could close, creating private spaces where boundaries blurred. How after-hours meetings could shift from academic guidance to something more insidious. How a teacher's words of encouragement could transform into psychological chains, binding a vulnerable student to a destructive path. In the carefully cultivated perfection of Ravenwood, darkness found fertile ground. And it began, as these stories often do, with something that appeared innocent on the surface. A teacher who stayed late to help a struggling student. A connection that seemed to celebrate academic potential. A relationship that, to outside observers, exemplified the very best of education. But beneath this facade of mentorship lay something far more dangerous. A calculated campaign of isolation, manipulation, and control that would escalate beyond anything anyone in this peaceful town could have imagined. This is the story of Clara Whitmore and Evan Grayson, a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences when those we trust with our children's minds decide to claim their hearts, their loyalty, and ultimately their lives. To understand how a respected educator became a murderer, we must first understand Clara Whitmore. At 32, she wasn't just another teacher at Ravenwood Academy, she was the teacher everyone wanted. Students fought to get into her literature classes. Parents requested her specifically during enrollment. The administration showcased her innovative teaching methods to prospective families. On paper, Clara was flawless. advanced degrees from prestigious universities, glowing recommendations, a teaching philosophy that emphasized personal connection and emotional intelligence. Her classroom walls featured inspirational quotes from classic literature and student work proudly displayed. Her demeanor, warm, engaging, with just enough authority to command respect, made her the ideal educator in the eyes of the community. But this carefully constructed image concealed a fractured foundation. Clara's childhood had been marked by profound trauma. Her father, a respected community figure in public but a tyrant at home, subjected her to emotional abuse and impossible standards. Her mother, emotionally absent, offered no protection. Clara learned early that external validation was her only path to worth. She became exceptional at reading others, at becoming exactly what they needed her to be. This skill served her well in the classroom. She could identify each student's insecurities and aspirations within minutes. She tailored her approach to each individual, stern with those who needed boundaries, nurturing with those who craved attention, challenging with those who responded to intellectual stimulation. This wasn't just good teaching, it was survival strategy repurposed. Clara's need for control manifested in subtle ways colleagues never noticed. The meticulous arrangement of her desk, the carefully planned spontaneous discussions, the way she maintained physical distance from most students while strategically offering proximity to select few. She created an environment where she was always at the center, the sun around which her students orbited. Most concerning was her pattern of special connections with vulnerable students. Each year, Clara identified one or two who became her projects, students with obvious talent but hidden pain. She devoted extra time to them, offering what appeared to be mentorship. Previous schools had noted this pattern but dismissed concerns. After all, these students improved dramatically under her guidance. Their grades rose. Their confidence grew. Their loyalty to Clara became absolute. What administrators failed to recognize were the warning signs. These students' gradual isolation from peers, their defensive reactions when Clara was criticized, their adoption of her perspectives and mannerisms. These weren't students being guided toward independence. They were being molded into reflections of Clara's needs and desires. By the time Clara arrived at Ravenwood Academy, she had perfected her methodology. She knew exactly how to present herself to different audiences, passionate educator to administrators, trusted colleague to teachers, life-changing mentor to students. And she knew how to identify the perfect targets for her attention, students with the precise combination of talent, vulnerability, and isolation that made them susceptible to her particular form of manipulation. In Evan Grayson, Clara found her ideal subject. And for the first time, her calculated mentorship would escalate beyond psychological control into something far more dangerous. At 17, Evan Grayson embodied the ideal Ravenwood Academy student. Captain of the soccer team. Consistent honor roll recipient. Early acceptance to 3 prestigious universities. His essays won national competitions. His art hung in local galleries. Teachers described him as thoughtful, mature, and exceptionally gifted. To outsiders, Evan's future seemed limitless and assured. This external success masked a profound emotional void. Evan's parents, both high-powered attorneys, had built a life defined by achievement rather than connection. Their sprawling home in Ravenwood's most exclusive neighborhood stood empty most days. Dinner conversations, when they occurred, centered on cases won and negotiations completed. Evan's accomplishments were acknowledged with perfunctory praise, then quickly forgotten. This emotional neglect created in Evan a hunger for genuine validation. He performed brilliantly not from passion but from desperation, each achievement an attempt to be truly seen. Yet no matter how many trophies accumulated in his room, the hollowness persisted. His parents' approval remained conditional, fleeting, and ultimately unsatisfying. Evan maintained a carefully curated social persona. He attended the right parties, dated appropriate girls from good families, participated in the expected extracurricular activities. His friendships, however, remained superficial. He never invited classmates to his empty house. He deflected personal questions with practiced charm. Even his closest friends knew only the version of Evan he allowed them to see. The one exception was his relationship with his older brother, Liam. Despite their different temperaments and life choices, Liam had always been Evan's emotional anchor. When their parents missed soccer games or art exhibitions, Liam showed up. When academic pressure became overwhelming, Liam provided perspective. When the performance of perfection became too exhausting, Liam offered a rare space where Evan could simply exist without expectation. Evan's relationship with adults had always been marked by performance rather than trust. Teachers saw his potential and pushed for more. Coaches valued his athletic contributions. Parents of friends admired his politeness and achievements. But none had ever looked beyond his carefully maintained facade to see the loneliness beneath. This combination, exceptional talent, emotional isolation, and a desperate yearning for genuine connection, made Evan particularly vulnerable to manipulation. When Clara Whitmore began paying special attention to him, offering the validation and understanding he craved, Evan had no defense against her calculated interest. Her attention filled a void he'd carried his entire life. Her praise felt different from the hollow acknowledgments he received from others. Her interest seemed to extend beyond his accomplishments to his thoughts, his feelings, his true self. What Evan couldn't recognize was how precisely Clara had identified his vulnerabilities and tailored her approach to exploit them. What felt like genuine connection was, in reality, the beginning of a deadly entrapment. Liam Grayson existed in stark contrast to his younger brother. Where Evan followed every rule, Liam questioned authority. Where Evan channeled his feelings into achievement, Liam expressed his through rebellion. At 19, Liam had already accumulated a history of minor offenses: trespassing, possession of marijuana, vandalism, each an expression of rage against their parents' emotional absence. Despite his outward defiance, Liam possessed an acute emotional intelligence and fierce protective instinct toward Evan. He recognized in his younger brother a different response to the same family dysfunction: Evan's desperate people-pleasing versus his own rejection of expectations. This understanding created between them a bond that transcended their different paths. Liam had left Ravenwood shortly after high school, dropping out of community college and drifting through a series of low-wage jobs and temporary accommodations. His return home came after months of increasingly concerning phone calls with Evan. Something in his brother's voice had changed. A flatness, a hesitation, a quality Liam couldn't name but instinctively distrusted. Within days of his return, Liam noticed disturbing changes in Evan. His formerly predictable schedule now included unexplained absences. His phone buzzed constantly with messages he'd hide from view. When questioned, Evan became defensive in ways completely out of character. Most alarming were the moments when Evan seemed to quote opinions and perspectives that didn't align with his previous values, as if he were channeling someone else's thoughts. Liam lacked the educational pedigree and social standing of his parents, but he possessed something far more valuable in this situation: unwavering loyalty to his brother and an instinctive ability to detect manipulation. Where teachers saw Clara's interest as appropriate mentorship and parents saw improved academic focus, Liam recognized the signs of isolation and control. His protective nature, coupled with his outsider perspective, made Liam uniquely positioned to recognize the danger Clara posed. He became the only person willing to question the narrative of the beloved teacher's special interest in a promising student. In a community blinded by credentials and reputation, Liam's skepticism made him both Evan's greatest protection and, ultimately, Clara's most significant obstacle. As Clara's influence over Evan intensified, Liam's determination to intervene would set in motion a confrontation with catastrophic consequences, proving that sometimes, the person who sees the truth most clearly becomes the greatest threat to those with secrets to protect. The foundation of Clara's manipulation was laid during an ordinary Tuesday in September. Evan stayed after class to discuss his analysis of The Great Gatsby. What should have been a 15-minute conversation extended to nearly an hour as Clara gradually shifted the discussion from literature to Evan's personal interpretations and experiences. "Your perspective on Gatsby's obsession with Daisy shows remarkable emotional intelligence," she told him, maintaining eye contact a few seconds longer than normal. "Most students miss the psychological complexity. You have a rare gift for understanding human motivation." This moment, precisely calibrated praise delivered with apparent spontaneity, marked the beginning of Clara's calculated campaign. She had identified her target, and her approach was methodical. In the following weeks, she created a series of accidental encounters, arriving at the library when Evan studied there, appearing at his soccer games, suggesting books that aligned with interests he'd mentioned casually. Each interaction followed a pattern. Clara would begin with academic discussions, then gradually introduce personal elements. Her challenges with the school administration, her frustration with unmotivated students, her appreciation for finding someone who truly understood literature's deeper meanings. These confidences, seemingly innocent, created an illusion of reciprocal trust. By mid-October, Clara suggested their discussions might benefit from a change of venue. "The faculty lounge has thin walls," she explained. We could continue at Blackbird Cafe after school. Their quiet corner would be perfect for our literary debates. The transition from classroom to coffee shop represented a critical boundary crossing. School property, with its implicit rules and potential oversight, gave way to public spaces where they appeared simply as two people engaged in conversation. The physical setting changed, but more importantly, the psychological context shifted. At Blackbird Cafe, seated in a corner booth away from windows, Clara and Evan's meetings evolved. Their conversations expanded beyond literature to philosophy, ethics, and increasingly personal struggles. Clara positioned herself not as an authority figure but as a fellow seeker, someone who recognized Evan's exceptional qualities in ways others couldn't. "I don't normally connect with students this way," she told him during their third cafe meeting, her voice lowered confidentially. "But you're different. You think like an old soul. It's refreshing to have conversations that challenge me intellectually." This narrative, that their connection was unique, special, even destined, became the foundation upon which Clara would build increasingly inappropriate interactions. And Evan, starved for meaningful recognition, accepted each boundary shift without questioning the teacher's motivations or methods. Clara's approach to manipulation followed a sophisticated psychological playbook refined through previous special student relationships. She employed three primary tactics: strategic vulnerability, isolation, and creation of a shared reality. Strategic vulnerability began with carefully curated personal disclosures. Clara revealed selected traumas from her past: her father's emotional abuse, her mother's failure to protect her, her struggle to find authentic connections. These stories were delivered with calculated emotional restraint, positioning her as wounded but resilient. "I've never told anyone at the school about my childhood," she confided during one coffee shop session. "But I sense you'll understand in ways others can't. We recognize each other's pain, don't we?" This false equivalence between her adult experiences and Evan's adolescent struggles created an artificial intimacy. By positioning herself as both wounded healer and fellow victim, Clara established a foundation for Evan to reveal his own vulnerabilities, information she meticulously cataloged for future leverage. The isolation phase proceeded methodically. Clara began subtly criticizing Evan's friends, not directly but through implication. "Jason seems nice, but does he really challenge you intellectually?" Or, "I noticed how Emma dismisses your deeper thoughts. You deserve friends who appreciate your complexity." Simultaneously, she created exclusive opportunities that separated Evan from peers. Special research projects, private literary discussions, recommendation letters for prestigious programs that required extensive one-on-one preparation. Each opportunity appeared beneficial to his future while effectively removing him from normal social interactions. Most insidiously, Clara cultivated dependency by alternating warm approval with subtle disappointment. She established herself as the primary source of validation in Evan's life, then strategically withheld that validation when he demonstrated independence or strengthened other relationships. "You seem distracted today," she might observe if he mentioned plans with friends. "I thought we had a special connection. Perhaps I've misinterpreted our relationship." These moments of withdrawal were precisely timed to maximize emotional impact, creating in Evan an anxious attachment pattern. The third tactic, creation of a shared reality, solidified Clara's control. She crafted a narrative in which she and Evan were intellectual equals trapped in different circumstances, united against a world that couldn't understand their connection. "Most people operate on such a surface level," she explained. "They follow rules without questioning. They accept limitations. But you and I see deeper truths. We understand that real connections transcend conventional boundaries." This framework recast inappropriate boundary crossings as acts of courage and authenticity. It positioned outside concerns as jealousy or small-mindedness. Most dangerously, it established Clara as the interpreter of reality, the one who defined which emotions and reactions were valid, which relationships were worthy, and which rules deserved to be followed. Through these calculated tactics, Clara systematically dismantled Evan's natural defenses and replaced his normal teenage development with a distorted reality centered entirely around her approval and attention. By December, Clara's boundary violations accelerated. The first text message arrived late one Tuesday evening, ostensibly about an assignment but containing personal postscripts that extended the conversation past midnight. Within weeks, these exchanges became nightly rituals, with Clara's messages growing increasingly personal. "I can't stop thinking about our conversation today," she wrote one night at 1:23 a.m. "No one has ever understood my perspective on love and commitment the way you do. Sometimes I forget you're my student. In my mind, we're just two souls who recognize each other. These late-night exchanges created an intimate ritual separate from their daytime interactions. In the classroom, Clara maintained appropriate professional distance. But through her phone, she cultivated a secret connection that existed outside school boundaries and normal hours. A relationship that felt both forbidden and inevitable. Physical boundaries shifted gradually. A hand on Evan's shoulder during discussions. Sitting closer at the cafe. Brief hugs that lingered several seconds too long. Each escalation was small enough to dismiss individually, yet collectively they normalized increasing intimacy. For Evan, these interactions produced conflicting emotions. Part of him recognized the inappropriateness of their evolving relationship. He deleted text threads, invented excuses for his absences from home, and avoided mentioning Clara to friends. Yet another part craved the validation she offered, the sense of being truly seen and valued that had been absent in his family life. This psychological conflict manifested physically. His sleep deteriorated. His appetite fluctuated. His academic performance in other classes declined as he focused exclusively on Clara's approval. These changes didn't go unnoticed, particularly by his recently returned brother. "You don't seem like yourself lately," Liam observed over a rare shared breakfast. "You're constantly checking your phone. You disappear for hours. Is something going on?" Evan's defensive reaction, accusatory tone, immediate withdrawal, protection of his phone, triggered Liam's protective instincts. Having struggled with his own destructive patterns, Liam recognized the signs of someone caught in an unhealthy dynamic. His suspicions intensified when he discovered a notebook filled with Evan's writings, poems and journal entries filled with references to forbidden understanding and connection beyond conventional limitations. The language didn't sound like Evan. It echoed someone else's philosophical framework imposed on his brother's thoughts. As January turned to February, the relationship between Clara and Evan crossed into increasingly dangerous territory. Her messages now included phrases like soul connection and transcending ordinary boundaries. Their meetings extended later into evenings. And Evan's emotional state became increasingly volatile, euphoric after contact with Clara, despondent when she withdrew attention. What had begun as seemingly innocent academic discussions had transformed into psychological entrapment, a textbook case of grooming that would soon escalate beyond manipulation into violence. If you're recognizing warning signs from this situation that remind you of relationships in your own life or community, please like this video and share it with others who might benefit. Understanding the gradual nature of grooming and manipulation could help identify dangerous situations before they reach crisis points. These patterns aren't random. They're recognizable and preventable when we know what to look for. Liam Grayson's concern for his brother transformed into action in early March. The changes in Evan, his secretive behavior, emotional volatility, and increasing isolation, triggered alarm bells Liam couldn't ignore. Rather than confronting Evan directly again, which had only resulted in defensive withdrawal, Liam decided to investigate the source of the change, Clara Whitmore. His first step was methodical reconnaissance. He observed the teacher from a distance, noting how her professional demeanor shifted subtly when interacting with Evan. The lingering eye contact, the casual physical proximity, the way her attention remained fixed on him even when addressing others. These weren't the actions of a dedicated educator but the calculated moves of someone with hidden intentions. Liam's breakthrough came through persistence and networking. During a conversation at a local bar, he mentioned Clara's name to a former classmate now working as an administrative assistant at the district office. Her expression changed immediately. "Whitmore? She transferred here from Oak Ridge Prep 2 years ago. Left under weird circumstances from what I heard." This casual comment led Liam to Oak Ridge Preparatory Academy, where he discovered Clara's departure had coincided with hushed allegations regarding her relationship with a student. Nothing had been formally documented. The wealthy family involved preferred discretion over publicity, but the pattern was unmistakable. Further digging revealed Clara's first teaching position at Westlake High had ended similarly. A male colleague from that period reluctantly confirmed. There were concerns about her closeness with a particular student. Nothing proven, but enough smoke that administration suggested she seek opportunities elsewhere. Armed with this history, Liam waited outside Ravenwood Academy one afternoon in late March. As Clara walked to her car, he approached directly. "I know about Oak Ridge," he stated without preamble. "And Westlake before that. You have a pattern, Ms. Whitmore?" Clara's composed facade faltered momentarily before reforming into professional concern. "I'm sorry, you are?" "Evan's brother. The one person who sees what you're doing to him." Their conversation lasted less than 5 minutes but established the battle lines clearly. Clara denied any impropriety, suggesting Liam's troubled history made him prone to paranoia and distrust of authority. Liam countered with specific details about her past allegations and the changes in Evan's behavior. "Stay away from my brother," Liam warned as he turned to leave. "Whatever you think you're doing stops now, or the administration learns about your history at previous schools." Clara's response was chilling in its calm delivery. "Evan is an exceptional student who benefits from proper mentorship. It would be a shame if your unfounded accusations interfered with his promising future. Consider carefully before you damage his opportunities based on your own misinterpretations." This confrontation, brief but intense, marked the beginning of a dangerous escalation. Clara now recognized Liam as a threat to her carefully constructed reality, one she couldn't afford to ignore. Clara's response to Liam's challenge was immediate and calculated. Rather than retreating, she intensified her hold over Evan through sophisticated psychological manipulation. First came preemptive discrediting. "Your brother approached me today," she told Evan during their next meeting, her voice carefully modulated to convey hurt rather than anger. "He made disturbing accusations about our academic relationship. I'm worried about his mental state. His history of substance issues might be affecting his perception of reality." This strategic revelation accomplished multiple objectives. It positioned Liam as unstable, reframed any future warnings from him as paranoia, and created an adversarial dynamic between the brothers. Most effectively, it established Clara and Evan as allies against an external threat. Clara then accelerated Evan's isolation from his support network. She scheduled additional meetings that conflicted with his family dinners and social events. She expressed disappointment when he mentioned plans with friends. She questioned his commitment to their special connection whenever he prioritized other relationships. "I thought you understood what we have," she would say, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Most people go their entire lives without finding someone who truly sees them. But if you're not ready for that depth of understanding, perhaps I've misjudged you." These tactics created a psychological vice. When Evan spent time with family or friends, he felt guilty about betraying Clara. When he dedicated himself to Clara, he felt anxious about neglecting other relationships. This constant tension left him exhausted, confused, and increasingly dependent on Clara to interpret his own emotions. Meanwhile, Liam watched his brother's deterioration with growing alarm. Evan lost weight. Dark circles formed under his eyes. His formerly impeccable academic performance in other classes slipped noticeably. Most concerning was his emotional flatness, interrupted by bursts of defensive rage whenever Liam mentioned Clara. Liam attempted multiple interventions. He tried reasoning with Evan, presenting the evidence he'd gathered about Clara's past. He appealed to their parents, who dismissed his concerns as overprotectiveness. He even approached the school principal, who reminded him that Clara was a highly respected educator with an exemplary record at Ravenwood. Each failed attempt strengthened Liam's resolve. He began documenting everything, taking photos of Evan and Clara meeting off campus, recording timestamps of late-night text exchanges, noting the increasing frequency of Evan's absences from home. His apartment wall became covered with evidence of Clara's methodical manipulation. "I won't let her destroy you," he promised his brother during a rare moment of connection. "Even if you can't see what's happening, I can. And I'll stop it." This statement, delivered with unwavering determination, represented a direct challenge to Clara's control, one that would soon push her beyond manipulation into violence. By mid-April, Clara recognized that Liam would not be deterred. His investigation continued despite her attempts to discredit him. His protection of Evan intensified despite her efforts to drive a wedge between them. Most alarmingly, she discovered he had contacted administrators at her previous schools, potentially exposing the pattern she had carefully concealed. Clara's carefully constructed world began collapsing. The administration scheduled an unexpected performance review. Parents questioned her about rumors they'd heard. Even her most loyal colleagues maintained subtle distance during faculty meetings. The walls were closing in, and Clara made a decision that crossed the line from manipulation to premeditated violence. On April 22nd, she sent Liam a text message. "We need to discuss Evan. This situation has gone too far. Meet me at Ravenwood Trail tomorrow at 8 p.m. Come alone. This stays between us." Her plan was methodical. The meeting location, a secluded clearing in the dense woods bordering the eastern edge of town, offered privacy and limited escape routes. The timing ensured darkness would provide cover. Most importantly, the invitation appealed directly to Liam's protective instinct. An opportunity to resolve the threat to his brother would be impossible to refuse. What Clara didn't anticipate was Evan's growing awareness of her manipulation. The fog of infatuation had begun lifting as her behavior became increasingly erratic. Her formerly subtle control tactics had become obvious demands. Her warm approval had transformed into cold withdrawal punctuated by bursts of intense attention. Most revealing were her increasingly frantic warnings about Liam's dangerous interference and unstable behavior. When Evan noticed the text from Clara on Liam's phone, left briefly unattended during dinner, a chilling clarity washed over him. The secretive meeting location. The insistence on coming alone. The timing after sunset. Every detail triggered alarm. "I'm handling it," Liam assured him when confronted. "This ends tomorrow." Evan nodded agreement but privately made his own plan. As twilight descended the following evening, he watched Liam leave their house with determined strides. Waiting just 5 minutes, Evan followed at a careful distance, staying hidden among the trees that lined the path to the clearing. The forest grew denser as the three individuals converged toward their fateful meeting point. Clara arrived first, pacing the clearing with nervous energy, her hand repeatedly touching the pocket of her coat. Liam appeared minutes later, his posture tense but resolute. And watching from the shadows, concealed behind a massive pine trunk, Evan witnessed the confrontation that would forever alter all their lives. The stage was set for violence. The forest held its breath. And in the growing darkness, 3 lives hurtled toward a moment from which none could return. The clearing where Clara waited stood isolated from Ravenwood's walking paths, accessible only through a narrow trail overgrown with thorny bushes and low-hanging branches. Ancient pines towered overhead, their dense canopy blocking most of the fading twilight. The only illumination came from a distant street lamp whose weak glow barely penetrated the woods, casting elongated shadows across the forest floor. The temperature had dropped sharply after sunset. Clara's breath formed visible clouds as she paced the small opening, repeatedly checking her watch and glancing toward the path. When Liam's footsteps finally crunched through the underbrush, she positioned herself against this meager light source, a deliberate choice that left her face partially obscured while placing Liam in full view. "Thank you for coming," Clara began, her voice carrying a practiced calm. "I thought it was important we discuss the situation with Evan directly, without misunderstandings." Liam remained at the clearing's edge, maintaining distance. "There's nothing to discuss. You're manipulating my brother. It stops now." "That's a serious accusation from someone with your history of instability." Clara's tone shifted subtly. "Evan is an exceptional student who deserves mentorship from someone who recognizes his potential. Your interference threatens his future." "I've contacted Oak Ridge Prep and Westlake High," Liam countered, stepping forward. "You've done this before, targeting vulnerable students, isolating them, creating inappropriate dependencies. The administration will have a full report tomorrow." Clara's composure fractured. "You have no proof. Just the word of a college dropout with substance abuse issues against a respected educator." "I have text messages. Photos of your off-campus meetings. Testimony from previous schools." Their voices escalated with each exchange. Clara's arguments became increasingly desperate, shifting from professional indignation to personal attacks. Liam remained focused on her pattern of behavior, methodically dismantling her defense. The breaking point came when Liam mentioned contacting Evan's parents directly. "They'll see the evidence. All of it. Your career ends tomorrow." Clara's face transformed, the mask of professional concern giving way to raw desperation. Her hands clenched into fists. Her shoulders tensed. The change was so profound that Liam took an instinctive step backward, suddenly aware of something dangerous awakening in the woman before him. "You don't understand what you're destroying," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "No one has ever connected with me the way Evan does. No one else sees me, truly sees me." In that moment, Liam recognized he wasn't facing a calculating predator but something potentially more dangerous. A person who genuinely believed in the righteousness of her destructive actions. The transformation happened in seconds. Clara's right hand slipped into her coat pocket and emerged holding a hunting knife, 6 inches of polished steel catching the dim light as she raised it. "I tried to reason with you," she said, her voice now eerily steady. "I tried to make you understand the special connection Evan and I share. But you refused to see beyond your narrow perspective of appropriate relationships." Liam raised his hands, backing toward the path. Clara put the knife down. "This isn't going to solve anything." "It solves everything," she countered, advancing slowly. You're the only obstacle. Once you're gone, Evan will understand our connection again. Your poisonous influence will be removed." From his hidden position 20 yards away, Evan watched in frozen horror. His mentor, the woman who had spoken so eloquently about literature and human connection, now moved with predatory purpose toward his brother. His mind struggled to reconcile the Clara who had quoted poetry about the beauty of human bonds with this stranger wielding a knife in the darkening woods. The attack came with shocking speed. Clara lunged forward, the knife arcing through the air. Liam dodged the first strike and grabbed her wrist, but Clara fought with unexpected strength. They struggled, feet slipping on the damp forest floor, their shadows merging into a single writhing form. A terrible cry cut through the night. Pain and surprise mingled in a sound that would haunt Evan forever. Liam staggered backward, clutching his abdomen where the knife had found its mark. Clara pulled the blade free and struck again and again, her movements frenzied and mechanical. When Liam collapsed, Clara stood motionless above him, the reality of her actions seemingly dawning on her face. Blood covered her hands, her coat, spreading across the forest floor in a dark pool visible even in the dim light. Methodically, she began arranging the scene. She placed the knife in Liam's hand, then removed it, wiping it clean before returning it to her pocket. She scattered leaves over the blood-soaked ground. She checked Liam's pockets, removing his phone and wallet. Throughout this grim process, she spoke quietly to herself, constructing a narrative of self-defense. "He attacked me. I had no choice. He was unstable. Anyone would have done the same." From his hiding place, Evan remained paralyzed, tears streaming silently down his face as he witnessed not just his brother's murder, but the calculated way Clara began constructing her alibi, revealing the true extent of her capacity for deception. Detective Nora Callahan arrived at the forest clearing at 5:43 a.m., summoned by a hiker who discovered Liam's body shortly after dawn. At 45, Callahan had spent 2 decades in law enforcement, the last 15 years handling homicide cases. She transferred to Ravenwood Police Department just 8 months earlier, seeking the quieter pace of a small town after years in Seattle's violent crimes unit. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd left the city to escape cases exactly like the one now before her. Callahan approached crime scenes with methodical precision. She observed without touching, photographed without disturbing, mentally cataloging details others might miss. The clearing told a story contradicting its apparent simplicity. "The body position has been altered," she noted to her partner. "See the drag marks in the soil? Someone moved him after death." Her trained eye caught other inconsistencies. Blood spatter patterns indicated multiple strike points, yet the body lay in a composed position. Leaf coverage over bloodstains appeared deliberate rather than natural. Most telling was the absence of a weapon despite wounds clearly caused by a knife. "This scene has been staged," she concluded, pulling on latex gloves. "Someone wanted this to look like something it wasn't." As the medical examiner confirmed multiple stab wounds as the cause of death, Callahan's attention shifted to the victim's identity. Liam Grayson, 19, recently returned to Ravenwood after dropping out of college. A troubled history but no violent offenses. A brother at the local academy. Parents rarely home. By noon, Callahan had her first suspect and a narrative that, while plausible on the surface, raised more questions than it answered. Clara Whitmore arrived at the police station voluntarily at 1:15 p.m. Dressed in a conservative gray suit with minimal makeup, she projected composed grief, the appropriate response of an educator confronted with violence touching her school community. Her story emerged with practiced precision. She had encountered Liam Grayson the previous evening while walking the forest trails, a habit she maintained for exercise and reflection. The young man appeared agitated, confrontational. He accused her of inappropriate behavior toward his brother, accusations she found disturbing and unfounded. "He became increasingly aggressive," Clara explained, maintaining steady eye contact with Callahan. "When I tried to leave, he grabbed me. We struggled and he pulled a knife. In the confusion, I barely remember what happened. Somehow I got the knife away. He came at me again. I acted in self-defense." Clara described fleeing in panic, discarding the knife somewhere in the woods. Too traumatized to report immediately, she claimed to have spent the night in shocked isolation before hearing about the discovery of the body. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she concluded, tears finally appearing. "I was just protecting myself." The narrative was coherent. The emotional responses appropriately modulated. The progression from professional concern to reluctant violence followed logical patterns. Yet Callahan noted subtle discrepancies accumulating throughout the interview. Clara claimed to have fled immediately, yet the crime scene showed evidence of deliberate arrangement. She described a chaotic struggle, but Liam's wounds indicated precise, targeted strikes. Most significantly, her timeline contained a critical gap, nearly 3 hours between the alleged confrontation and her arrival home, documented by her apartment building's security cameras. Callahan's investigation expanded methodically. Cell phone records placed both Clara and Liam at the clearing at the reported time but revealed something else. Evan Grayson's phone had also pinged nearby towers during the critical period. A search of Clara's home uncovered clothing with traces of blood despite her claim of having discarded all items from that night. Forensic analysis of her laptop revealed deleted messages to Liam arranging the meeting, contradicting her story of a chance encounter. Most damaging was the discovery in her desk drawer. A journal documenting her special connection with Evan, filled with increasingly possessive language and references to Liam as an obstacle to their relationship. "People won't understand what Evan and I share," one entry read. "His brother certainly doesn't. He threatens everything with his interference. Some obstacles must be removed for true connection to flourish." As evidence accumulated, Callahan recognized the pattern. Clara's calculated self-defense narrative was disintegrating, revealing something far more disturbing: premeditated murder motivated by obsession. Yet the final piece remained elusive: an eyewitness who could definitively counter Clara's version of events. That missing element arrived unexpectedly on the investigation's 4th day. For 96 hours after his brother's murder, Evan Grayson existed in a twilight state of shock and disassociation. He attended classes mechanically. He responded to questions with minimal words. He avoided all contact with Clara, who had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. Inside, a war raged between terror and conscience. The image of Clara standing over his brother's body replayed constantly. The sound of Liam's final cry echoed in his dreams. Yet paralysis gripped him. Fear of Clara, fear of his own complicity, fear of destroying his future with a public connection to the case. His parents remained largely absent, addressing the tragedy through attorneys and funeral directors rather than emotional presence. Friends attempted to reach him but encountered walls of silence. He moved through days like a ghost, present physically while his mind remained trapped in that forest clearing. The turning point came during Liam's funeral. Standing before his brother's casket, Evan finally confronted the truth. His silence made him complicit. The relationship he had believed special and meaningful had been manipulation from the beginning. Clara's apparent understanding and validation, the connection he had craved, was a calculated campaign that had ultimately claimed his brother's life. "Liam tried to protect me," he whispered to his brother's casket. "Now I need to protect the truth." The following morning, Evan walked into the Ravenwood Police Department. Detective Callahan noted his appearance, pale, sleep-deprived, but with newfound resolve in his eyes. "I was there," he stated without preamble. "I saw everything." In the interview room, Evan's testimony emerged in painful detail. He described following Liam to the clearing, witnessing the confrontation, watching, frozen in horror, as Clara stabbed his brother repeatedly. Most crucially, he described her methodical staging of the scene afterward, the calculated actions of someone creating a false narrative rather than fleeing in panic. "She talked to herself while she did it," he recalled, voice breaking, rehearsing her story about self-defense, creating the version she would tell police. Evan's confession extended beyond witnessing the murder. He detailed the months of grooming, how Clara had isolated him, manipulated his emotions, created dependency, and positioned herself as the sole source of validation in his life. How she had systematically turned him against his brother through subtle criticism and planted doubts. How what he had believed was special recognition of his talents had actually been calculated exploitation of his vulnerabilities. "I couldn't see it while it was happening," Evan concluded, tears streaming down his face. "Liam saw the truth. He died trying to save me from her. I can't let his death mean nothing." His testimony provided the final element needed to fully dismantle Clara's carefully constructed lies. If you've recognized manipulation tactics from this case that remind you of situations in your own life or someone you know, please share your experiences in the comments. Predators like Clara rely on isolation and secrecy. Open discussion of these patterns is our strongest defense against them. What warning signs do you now recognize that might have once seemed like special attention or care? Clara Whitmore's trial began 8 months after Liam Grayson's murder, in a courthouse surrounded by news vans and curious onlookers. Ravenwood had never experienced a case that generated such intense public interest. The beloved teacher accused of grooming a student and murdering his protective brother shattered the community's sense of safety and trust. Inside the courtroom, Clara presented a carefully crafted image: conservative clothing, minimal makeup, a demeanor of quiet dignity. She maintained her self-defense narrative despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Her attorney portrayed her as a dedicated educator caught in an unfortunate confrontation with a troubled young man who had developed delusional concerns about her mentorship of his brother. This facade held through the prosecution's presentation of physical evidence: the knife recovered from the woods with her fingerprints, the blood evidence on her clothing, the cell phone records confirming she had arranged the meeting rather than encountering Liam by chance. Even when confronted with her journal entries detailing her obsession with Evan, Clara remained composed, explaining them as creative writing exercises misinterpreted by authorities. The breaking point came during Evan's testimony. As he recounted watching Clara stab his brother repeatedly, then methodically arrange the scene to support her self-defense claim, something in Clara visibly shifted. Her practiced composure fractured. She interrupted proceedings with outbursts directed at Evan, accusations of betrayal and ingratitude that revealed the possessive nature of her attachment. "After everything I did for you?" she shouted before being restrained by court officers. "I was the only one who truly saw you. He was keeping us apart. He deserved what happened." This outburst, witnessed by the jury and reported extensively in the media, destroyed any remaining credibility in her self-defense claim. The carefully constructed persona of the wrongfully accused teacher collapsed, revealing the disturbing reality beneath. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning with their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The judge, noting the premeditated nature of the crime and Clara's abuse of her position of trust, sentenced her to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. As Clara was led from the courtroom, her final glance toward Evan contained neither remorse nor acceptance, only a disturbing blend of possession and betrayal that confirmed the depth of her psychological distortion. For the community of Ravenwood, the sentence brought legal closure but left profound questions about how someone entrusted with their children had hidden such dangerous capacity for manipulation and violence. For Evan Grayson, the aftermath of trauma unfolded in complicated patterns of guilt, grief, and gradual healing. The dual burden of his brother's death and his own exploitation by a trusted authority figure created psychological wounds that defied simple recovery narratives. "I blamed myself constantly," Evan revealed in an interview 2 years after the murder. "If I hadn't been so desperate for validation, if I had recognized the manipulation earlier, if I had told Liam the truth from the beginning, maybe he would still be alive." This self-recrimination initially manifested as academic decline and social withdrawal. Evan abandoned his college acceptances, unable to imagine continuing his education after education had become weaponized against him. He moved in with his grandmother in another state, seeking anonymity away from Ravenwood's painful associations. Recovery began unexpectedly through a support group for survivors of psychological manipulation. Surrounded by others who had experienced similar exploitation, Evan gradually recognized that Clara's calculated grooming had been designed specifically to prevent him from recognizing its true nature. "Understanding the psychology behind what happened helped me stop blaming myself," he explained. "Clara identified my vulnerabilities and exploited them with expertise developed through previous relationships. Recognizing that pattern helped me separate my actions from her manipulation." 3 years after the murder, Evan returned to education, not as a student but as an advocate developing educational programs about recognizing and preventing inappropriate teacher-student relationships. His first-hand experience provided unique insight into the subtle warning signs often missed by institutions and families. Detective Nora Callahan remained deeply affected by the case as well. The investigation revealed systematic failures in how educational institutions handled previous concerns about Clara's behavior. Callahan developed specialized training for school administrators about recognizing grooming behaviors and properly documenting concerns, procedures that might have prevented tragedy had they been implemented earlier. Clara Whitmore didn't suddenly become dangerous at Ravenwood, Callahan noted during a law enforcement conference. She followed an escalating pattern across multiple schools, each of which failed to properly document concerns or communicate with subsequent employers. Those institutional failures created the perfect environment for her behavior to escalate from manipulation to murder. Ravenwood Academy underwent comprehensive restructuring in response to the tragedy. New policies required all one-on-one student meetings to occur in visible spaces with doors open. Electronic communications between teachers and students were routed through monitored platforms rather than private channels. Most significantly, administrative staff received extensive training in recognizing grooming behaviors and documenting concerns, with mandatory reporting requirements that prevented the quiet transfers that had allowed Clara's pattern to continue across multiple institutions. The Ravenwood case represents a statistical outlier in its violent conclusion but illuminates patterns present in hundreds of cases nationwide. According to the Department of Education, approximately 10% of students experience some form of sexual misconduct by school personnel during their educational careers, with inappropriate relationships between teachers and older teens among the most common forms. These relationships typically begin through a recognizable progression: special attention and privileges, followed by increasing personal disclosures, gradual boundary violations, and systematic isolation from support networks. Digital communications often facilitate this progression, creating private channels for inappropriate conversations outside school supervision. Warning signs frequently visible to observers include students receiving excessive individual attention or special privileges, teachers sharing inappropriate personal information with specific students, isolation of students from peer relationships, communication extending beyond professional hours or platforms, students adopting the language patterns or perspectives of a particular adult, a defensiveness when the relationship is questioned. Educational institutions can protect students through structured oversight, limited private interactions, transparent communication channels, and clear reporting procedures for concerning behaviors. The most effective prevention, however, remains education itself, teaching students, parents, and communities to recognize manipulation tactics before they escalate, and fostering environments where concerns can be expressed without fear or dismissal. The story of Clara Whitmore and the Grayson brothers contains lessons that extend far beyond the boundaries of Ravenwood. At its core, this tragedy illuminates the dangerous intersection of power, trust, and vulnerability, forces that exist in every community and institution where adults guide young people. What makes this case particularly disturbing isn't just its violent conclusion but how preventable it could have been. Clara's manipulation followed recognizable patterns across multiple schools. Liam identified these patterns through intuition and basic investigation. Yet institutional blind spots, combined with Clara's calculated charm, allowed her behavior to continue until it culminated in murder. The most profound betrayal in this case wasn't just Clara's violation of professional boundaries but her weaponization of education itself. The very qualities that make effective teaching possible, building trust, recognizing potential, creating personal connections, became tools for exploitation. This perversion of the educational relationship represents a fundamental breach of our social contract. For parents and communities, this case underscores the importance of maintaining vigilance without surrendering trust. The solution isn't to view all close teacher-student relationships with suspicion. Such connections form the foundation of meaningful education. Rather, we must recognize the difference between mentorship that empowers students toward independence and relationships that create isolation and dependency. Key warning signs include excessive focus on a single student that excludes peers, the relationship dynamics that prioritize secrecy, communication that extends beyond appropriate hours and platforms, isolation from family and friends, critical comments about other adults in the student's life, emotional volatility when the relationship is questioned. For educational institutions, clear policies matter more than assumptions about character. Background checks, while necessary, cannot identify concerns that went unreported at previous positions. Transparent communication channels, limited private interactions, and established reporting procedures create environments where exploitation becomes more difficult and obvious. For students, understanding the psychology of manipulation provides protection. Predators identify vulnerabilities and offer precisely what seems most needed: validation for the insecure, understanding for the isolated, recognition for the overlooked. Awareness of these patterns helps young people distinguish genuine mentorship from calculated grooming. Liam Grayson's tragic death serves as a reminder that those who recognize manipulation and speak against it often face resistance. From institutions invested in their reputations, from communities resistant to uncomfortable truths, and from victims themselves, who may defend their abusers due to psychological dependency. His courage in confronting Clara despite these obstacles represents the vigilance all communities need. If this analysis has provided valuable insights about recognizing manipulation tactics, please subscribe to True Crime Dossier for more case studies that examine the psychological patterns behind criminal behavior. Your comments about warning signs you've recognized in your own experiences could help others identify similar situations before they escalate. What case would you like us to examine next? Share your suggestions in the comments section. By understanding how manipulation and violence develop, we strengthen our collective ability to protect the vulnerable and prevent future tragedies. Thank you for joining this exploration of how trust, when weaponized, can destroy lives, and how awareness can save them.